The hand was at her waist before Amara could breathe, before she could think, before the 6 bodyguards positioned throughout the ballroom could even process what was happening. You've lived in a cage your entire life. Kong Lucien's voice was dark honey over broken glass, his breath warm against her ear. I can see it in your eyes. Amara Lee, 23 years old, daughter of Korea's prime minister, monitored every second of every day, should have pulled away, should have signaled security, should have screamed for help. But his hand at her waist felt like the first honest touch she'd received in years, and that terrified her more than any threat her father had ever described. You don't know anything about me, she whispered, but her voice shook with something that wasn't quite fear. I know you're suffocating. His fingers tightened slightly, not forceful but certain. I know you scan every room for exits you're not allowed to use. I know you smile at people you don't care about because it's expected. And I know that right now you're trying to decide if I'm dangerous or if I'm the first real thing you've encountered in months. The music swelled around them. Crystal chandeliers caught light like captured stars overhead. Seoul's elite circulated through the Azure's 63rd floor ballroom in designer labels and inherited wealth, but Amara only felt the heat of Kong Lucien's body through the thin fabric of her midnight blue dress. Her bodyguards shifted closer. Hands moved toward concealed weapons. The entire room watched with held breath because everyone knew who he was, the man politicians feared to name, the Shadow King who ran half the city's underground while the other half pretended he didn't exist. And he was touching the Prime Minister's daughter like she already belonged to him. Why are you doing this? Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. Kong Lucien pulled back, just enough to meet her eyes, and she saw something in his gaze that made her knees weak. Not cruelty, not calculation, something rawer than that. Because I saw you standing there in your beautiful dress with your perfect posture and your empty eyes, and I thought, there she is. The one thing in the city I can't buy, or build, or take by force. The one thing I'd have to earn. The song ended. The spell should have broken. But neither of them moved. 6 hours earlier, Amara had been sitting in the back of an armored Mercedes, watching Seoul's neon-soaked streets blur past bulletproof windows, feeling nothing. Not excitement, not anticipation, just the hollow ache of a life lived in third person, narrated by men in black suits who decided when she could breathe, too deeply. The head of security, his name was something forgettable, they all had forgettable names, spoke without turning around. Miss Lee, we'll escort you directly to the private entrance. Amara smoothed her dress and said nothing. Words were just another thing that could be used against her. She'd learned that lesson early. 6 bodyguards surrounded her vehicle. 3 more waited at the venue. Her father had made it clear that his daughter's safety wasn't negotiable. Neither was her freedom, but he never said that part out loud. The Azure was members only, exclusive even by Seoul standards. Nina's birthday celebration. Her oldest friend, the only person who still called her Mara instead of Miss Lee, who still remembered she used to laugh without calculating the political implications first. Cameras flashed the moment Amara stepped out despite the venue's strict no-photography policy. Someone always leaked her location. Someone always wanted proof that the Prime Minister's daughter existed in their world, even if she couldn't truly touch it. Inside, Nina found her within seconds, pulling her into a hug that felt like the only real thing in the room. You came. Nina's voice was thick with relief. I wasn't sure your father would allow it. He doesn't allow anything, Amara murmured. He permits things. Temporarily. Nina studied her face with concern that made Amara's chest tighten. 2 hours. Just 2 hours where you're mine, not his. Can you do that? Amara wanted to believe it was possible. But her bodyguards had already positioned themselves at every exit, and the weight of her father's expectations sat heavier than the diamond necklace around her throat. The party hummed with controlled chaos, expensive champagne, carefully curated playlists, conversations that would shape business deals and political alliances by morning. Amara accepted a drink she wouldn't finish and smiled at people whose names she'd forget by midnight. This was her life. This had always been her life. Then the music changed. Not the song itself, but the way the crowd responded to it. A ripple of tension moved through the room like a stone dropped in still water. Conversation stuttered. Laughter died mid-note. People turned toward the entrance with expressions that couldn't quite hide their fear. Amara followed their gazes and felt the air leave her lungs. Kong Lucien walked through the door like he owned not just the room, but the entire concept of power itself. His suit was black and perfectly tailored, his dark hair pushed back from a face that cameras loved and politicians feared. He wasn't supposed to be here. Men like him didn't attend birthday parties for socialites. They existed in shadows and silence, in a world that ran parallel to her father's political empire but never intersected with it. Until now. Oh God! Nina breathed beside her. Why is he here? The crowd parted for him without anyone consciously deciding to move. Instinct. Prey recognizing predator. Kong Lucien crossed the floor with deliberate, unhurried steps, and Amara realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that he was looking directly at her. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Close enough that the expensive cedar and smoke scent of his cologne wrapped around her like a claim. Miss Lee. His voice was low, textured with danger. Your father surrounds you with guards as if you're made of something fragile. Amara forced her spine straight, channeling every lesson in composure her mother had drilled into her since childhood. That's none of your concern, Mr. Kong. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or satisfaction that she knew his name. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Her bodyguards tensed. Nina's fingers tightened on Amara's arm. She didn't move. His skin was warm against hers, his grip firm but not forceful. He lifted her hand and bent slightly, his lips brushing against her knuckles in a gesture that should have been courteous, but felt like something else entirely. Possession. Promise. Threat. The room held its breath. When he straightened, his gaze never left hers. How long has it been since someone asked what you wanted, Miss Lee? Not your father. Not your security team. You. The question landed like a blade between her ribs. Amara pulled her hand back, heart hammering. I don't know what you think you're doing. Looking, he interrupted quietly. Just looking. It's been a very long time since I've seen anything worth the attention. A young man approached from her left, the son of a National Assembly member, handsome in that carefully maintained way that came from personal trainers and family money. Amara, would you like to dance? Kong Lucien shifted slightly, not aggressive, just present in a way that made the other man's courage visibly falter. She already has a partner. No, I don't, Amara said sharply. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then let me correct that oversight. His hand settled at her waist with confidence that bordered on arrogance, guiding her toward the dance floor before she could fully process what was happening. She should have refused. Should have called her security. Should have done anything except allow this man to pull her into the music. But she let him. And now they were here, moving together in a way that felt both dangerous and inevitable. His hand at her waist felt like a brand. Every point of contact between them burned. Her palm against his shoulder, the minimal space between their bodies that felt both too much and not enough. I'm not a thing, Amara whispered, finding her voice again. No. Kong Lucien's gaze intensified. You're not. You're something much more dangerous than that. The song ended. Amara stepped back quickly, her legs unsteady. He caught her elbow with surprising gentleness. Careful, he said softly. She pulled away, thoughts scattered. I need air. Then breathe. He released her but didn't move. I'll be here when you remember what real air tastes like. Amara fled to the balcony. The November air bit at her bare shoulders, but she welcomed the cold. It felt real in a way nothing else had for months. Nina appeared beside her moments later. Mara, what was that? I don't know. Amara's hands shook as she gripped the railing. That was Kong Lucien, the man who runs half the city's underground while the other half pretends he doesn't exist. Nina's voice carried equal parts fear and fascination. Your father would lose his mind if he knew Lucien even spoke to you. My father doesn't control who speaks to me. Doesn't he? The truth of that question settled like ice in Amara's stomach. She thought of her monitored phone calls, her scheduled appearances, her pre-approved social circle. Her father controlled everything about her life except what she thought about in the dark hours before dawn. And lately, in those dark hours, she'd been thinking about freedom. Inside, Kong Lucien stood near the bar, accepting a drink he wouldn't taste. A woman approached him, tall, elegant, familiar in the way that suggested history, and placed a hand on his arm. "You're distracted," Hannah said quietly. She'd known Lucien for 5 years, had shared his bed and his secrets, and she recognized the look on his face. She'd just never seen it directed at anyone else. "I am," he agreed simply. "She's the Prime Minister's daughter." "I'm aware." Hannah's grip tightened slightly. "Lucien, this isn't like your usual interests. This is political suicide. Her father has more security around her than the Blue House. She's untouchable." Kong Lucien finally looked at her, and Hannah saw something in his expression that made her chest constrict. Not cruelty, not calculation, something rawer. "I don't want to touch her," he said quietly. "I want to set her free. And then," his mouth curved into something dark, "and then I want her to choose me anyway." Hannah stepped back, recognizing defeat. She'd watched Kong Lucien build an empire from nothing, had seen him outmaneuver politicians and rivals with equal ease. But she'd never seen him vulnerable. Not until tonight. Not until a girl in a blue dress with sad eyes and silk chains had walked into a party she didn't want to attend. 3 hours later, Amara lay in her bedroom in her father's compound, because it was a compound, not a home, with its security checkpoints and surveillance systems, and touched the hand Kong Lucien had kissed. She could still feel the warmth of his mouth against her skin, the certainty in his voice when he'd said she was suffocating. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Sleep well, Miss Lee. Tomorrow we talk." She should have blocked the number. Should have reported it to security. Should have done anything except save the contact and stare at those 11 words until they blurred. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the Han River, Kong Lucien stood at floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the lights below. He'd built his empire in shadows, had learned to move through a world where power was currency and fear was respect. He'd never wanted anything he couldn't take through strategy or force. Until her. "What are you doing?" Hannah asked from the doorway. She hadn't left despite the obvious dismissal. They'd been friends too long for that. "Something reckless," Lucien admitted. "Reckless gets you killed in our world." He turned to face her, and his expression was calm. "Certain. Then I'll die having lived for 5 minutes. That's more than most people get. She won't choose you. She can't. Her entire life is built around duty and protection. Then I'll give her a reason to burn it down." The next morning, Amara attended a political fundraiser with her father. It was the kind of event she'd endured hundreds of times. Endless handshakes, strategic conversations, cameras capturing her perfect smile beside Korea's prime minister. Her mother stood to her father's left, elegant in cream silk, the perfect political wife who'd learned to make herself small enough to fit into his ambitions. Amara had her mother's Nigerian beauty and her father's Korean steel. She'd inherited the best and worst of both their worlds and belonged fully to neither. The fundraiser took place in the Grand Hyatt's ballroom. Politicians and business leaders mingled over champagne and careful ambitions. Amara had perfected the art of being present without being seen, of participating without engaging. Then he walked in. Kong Lucien shouldn't have been there. Couldn't have been there. The guest list was vetted 3 times by security, and men like him didn't receive invitations to events hosted by the Prime Minister. Yet there he stood, devastating in a charcoal suit, speaking with an assemblyman as if he belonged. Amara's father saw him at the same moment. His entire posture changed, tension radiating from him in waves. Security personnel materialized from nowhere, surrounding the Prime Minister's family in a protective formation. "What is he doing here?" her father demanded quietly, voice sharp enough to cut. "Minister Park." Kong Lucien crossed the space between them with that same unhurried confidence. "An unexpected pleasure. You weren't invited." "No." Lucien's smile held no apology. "But I'm very good at finding places I'm not supposed to be." The 2 men faced each other, political power versus underground empire, and Amara felt the weight of their unspoken war. This wasn't just about territory or cross lines. This was about her, and both men knew it. Kong Lucien's gaze kept sliding toward Amara despite his conversation with her father. Each time, her father's jaw tightened. "If you'll excuse me," her father said coldly, "I have actual guests to attend to." He guided Amara away with a hand that looked gentle and felt like iron. Her mother followed, silent and observant. They'd almost reached the far side of the ballroom when Amara felt something pressed into her palm. She looked down. A business card, heavy stock, elegant lettering. No name, just an address and a time, 3 p.m. tomorrow. Her father didn't notice. Her security didn't notice. But when she looked back, Kong Lucien was watching her with an expression that made her knees weak. That night, Amara sat with her mother in the private sitting room of their compound. Her father was in his office, surrounded by security briefings and political strategy. He was always in his office. "Mama," Amara said quietly, "when you married father, did you know what it would be like? The security, the restrictions, the constant watching." Her mother looked up from her book, dark eyes knowing. "I knew I was trading one kind of cage for another. In Nigeria, I was caged by poverty and limited options. Here, I'm caged by protection and privilege." She paused. "The difference is I chose this cage. You were born into yours. I can't breathe." "I know, sweet girl." Her mother reached over, taking Amara's hand. "Your father loves you. That's why he guards you so carefully. He's seen what this world does to beautiful young women with power. He's seen the threats, the kidnapping attempts, the way enemies use loved ones as leverage. So I'm supposed to live my entire life behind glass? I don't have that answer." Her mother's voice was soft. "But I know that freedom comes with a price. And sometimes the price is higher than we're willing to pay." Amara thought of Kong Lucien's card, hidden in her dresser drawer. Thought of his low voice asking when someone had last cared what she wanted. Thought of the choice forming like a storm in her chest. At 3 p.m. the next day, Amara stood outside a private cafe in Itaewon. She dismissed her security team with a lie about meeting a university friend, and her hands shook as she pushed open the door. Kong Lucien sat in a corner booth, half in shadow. He stood when she entered, and for a moment they just looked at each other. "You came," he said. "I shouldn't have. But you did." He gestured to the seat across from him. 5 minutes. If you want to leave after 5 minutes, I'll disappear from your life entirely. You'll never see me again." Amara sat because standing felt too vulnerable. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I looked at you and saw someone drowning in silk. Because I built everything I have by taking risks no sane person would take." He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping. "Because I haven't been able to think about anything else since I touched your hand." "You don't know me." "Then let me." His intensity was overwhelming. "Let me know the woman behind the title. The one who touches her own hand because she remembers how it felt to be seen. The one who stands on balconies and dreams about places her bodyguards can't follow." Amara's breath caught. "And if I say yes? If I let you know me? What then?" Kong Lucien's expression softened into something dangerous. "Then I'll show you what it feels like to make choices that matter. To want something for yourself instead of because it's expected. To live instead of exist. My father will never allow it. Your father doesn't own you. No one owns you." He paused. "Not even me. That's the difference between me and everyone else in your life, Amara. I don't want to cage you. I want to see what you become when you finally get to fly." 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. They talked about nothing important, books, music, the way Seoul looked from high places, and everything important. For the first time in her life, Amara felt like a person having a conversation instead of a politician's daughter giving calculated responses. When she finally left, her security team was frantic. Her father was already being briefed. There would be consequences. But Amara touched her phone where Kong Lucien's Real number was now saved, and she smiled. Some cages were lined with silk, some prisons had chandeliers, and some storms were exactly what you needed to finally feel alive. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me the moment that grabbed you the most. Your support helps the channel grow and brings you more stories like this.